各位贵宾、师长、同学们，大家午安，大家好，我是蝴蝶兰以礼大使涂雅婷，非常高兴能担任今天的司仪。今天的讲座非常荣幸邀请到加拿大多伦多大学 Robert Reisz Chair Professor 莅临本校。演讲的主题为 Exceptional Rate of Tooth Development and Replacement in the Komodo Dragon and Comparison with Other Reptiles and with Dinosaurs。相信借由本次珍贵难得的机会，能让在座各位收获满满。Now let's welcome our guest。在讲座开始之前，先向各位介绍今日的与会贵宾，也请各位给予热烈的掌声，表示欢迎。首先是主讲人 Robert Reisz Chair Professor。Welcome, Professor。让我们欢迎杨长贤副校长。生命科学院黄介成院长。生科系陈全木讲座教授。刘英明主任。施习德教授。许秋荣教授。曾于新助理教授。生医所张家哲教授。生化所周山和教授。中研院生医所杨世斌教授。也感谢社科院的师长们拨冗参加。Before the speech, we invite Professor Robert to come to the stage to sign the speech poster. Please come to the stage, Professor. Professor, please wait. 接下来，为了感谢 Professor Robert 千里迢迢来到本校进行演讲 ，Please wait。本校特别准备了一面象征最高荣誉的惠蓀琉璃讲座，要致赠给 Professor Robert， 请杨副校长上台颁发讲座。Please look at the camera。教授对古生物界可是贡献良多，借由今日的合影，象征学界与古生物界的进一步交流。谢谢副校长，副校长请回座。Professor Robert, please wait。生命科学院还另外准备了精美礼品，有请黄院长致赠。Please look at the camera。谢谢两位再麻烦请留步。我们要接下来进行生科院的师长们一同进行大合照，请生科院的师长们上台与教授一同合照留念，纪念这难得的时刻。请各位师长们不用吝啬，上台跟教授一同合照，谢谢。谢谢各位师长们，师长们请回座。接下来我们要跟各位在场的同学们一起进行大合照。谢谢各位师长们。接着，让我们以热烈的掌声，邀请杨副校长为讲座进行引言。
Okay, good afternoon. And this is really my pleasure to have this opportunity to introduce Dr. Robert Reisz to you for today's special seminar. And Dr. Reisz actually received his bachelor degree, master degree, and PhD degree all in McGill University. Then he got, after graduating in 1975, got a PhD degree. Then he spent a year in California, I think. and recruited back to Canada, then joined the University of Toronto since 1975. And since then he promoted as an associate professor, assistant professor, and distinguished professor until now. So he is a well-known, world-class, so-called vertebrate paleontologist. So he's very, very good. So this is really my honor because I am not in this field. So I am in plant field. So, but I heard your name for a long time. And after he got the job, then he was actually, he got many awards around the world. And he also was appointed as a adjunct chair professor, honorable professor around the world. When I count, at least more than 10 places, included United States, like University of Oklahoma and some university in South Africa also. In mainland China, the Jilin University also appointed him as an honorable chair professor. Then in Taiwan, we are not the only university. So we are not. He is not only share his time with us, you know, but I hope you can spend more time with us because he was appointed as a chair professor in Zhongxin University, also in Central University, Zhongyang Daxue, also in Chenggong University. So I heard that yesterday you went to Chenggong University to give a talk before us. Okay, then and also he become got many positions, not only in university, also in some museum. So he spent so many times around to service around the world. Then he also devoted his time in field research trip around the world. So he discovered, everybody know, he discovered many fossils of dinosaurs, not only in one place, is around the world. Then he now is he received many awards that included like as admission for Royal Society of Canada, then also in Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, and also is a member for American Association for Advanced Sciences. Is an elected fellow. So he is really good, and he published during his career. He published more than 200 papers, and all in very high reputative journal, such as Science, Nature, and PNAS, Nature Communications. Then I should mention two papers. Then one is published in 2013 in Nature paper. Then that paper discovered the oldest, the fossil regarding oldest dinosaur embryo. And why I point out that paper is that paper actually is the author included the faculties in our university. You know, that's cooperate with our faculty. Then another paper in 2020 published in Nature Communication also is very high ranking paper, and also included the faculties from our university. So actually, he really helped us because his record, you know, helped the growth of our colleagues. Then also his record can help us to get some like funding from Ministry of Education. Okay, thank you very much. So I don't want to spend a lot more time to introduce him because I would like to leave more time to let him to introduce his research to us. So please join me to welcome Dr. Robert Reisz.
谢谢副校长，副校长请回座。
Well, thank you. Yes. It's moving. Thank you, that's good. Okay. So when I give a talk, I like to talk about not my past research. I want to talk about what I'm doing now. So this is a bit of a problem because some of the material that I'm going to talk about is actually unpublished, or we are in the process of submitting to one journal or another. So I think I may have to discuss with you what can be put on the web or what not, because major journals do not like their research results when they are published to be already out there on the web or in publicity. This is a modern problem for us all. Anyway, so I'm a vertebrate paleontologist, and most of my life I have studied animals which are really ancient, anywhere from 360 to around 200 million years ago. So what am I doing today? Well, let's see. I think it's good if I turn it on. Okay. What am I doing looking at a Komodo dragon? Well, I'm not alone. Usually I am with co-authors of all kinds and researchers, people who help me, and I get money from University of Toronto, the Canadian government, and Jilin University. But the question is, why did we decide to actually work on the Komodo dragon? You know, I'm a paleontologist. Well, it's all about teeth. So today I'm going to talk about teeth in the Komodo dragon. And the way it came about is that I keep on publishing about ancient animals and their teeth, like this one, when we talk about the multiple tooth-rowed parareptile from Oklahoma, or this one on a very ancient stem amniote. So it's not an amniote, it's outside amniota, called Samoria. And then recently we published this paper on a hypercarnivore from around 289 million years ago. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's how come I became interested in Varanus komodoensis, the Komodo dragon. When you look at the skull, after it has been skeletonized, and it's a very disgusting way to do it. What you take a dead animal and you put it in a special box with bugs, and the bugs eat the flesh, and they only are left with the skeleton. So anyway, this is what we do. It's pretty stinky too. So anyway, when you look at this, you realize that in the skeleton, those teeth look very much like a theropod dinosaur, even though when it opens its mouth, you cannot even see the teeth because there's so much flesh and gum in the Komodo dragon. But what happens is that when we went to the zoo and we talked to the zookeepers, who even Toronto has a Komodo dragon pair, they have lots of teeth on the ground. They are teeth that have been shed, but the teeth come off the animal, and this is what it looks like. And in fact, I think you can see even from far away that it's serrated. It has these sort of serrations along the edge there and along the edge there, which is actually very similar to that of a large theropod dinosaur. There you have, this is about 14 centimeters in length for something like T-Rex. This is about 4 centimeters, so it's smaller, but it has the same kind of serrations there as in the theropod dinosaur. So this is why we became interested in the Komodo, because it's the only living animal, other than dinosaurs and some other ancient animals, that today have these serrations. We call that zyphodonty. It's just a term. So the Komodo is really a very interesting animal. It is known, it's the largest member of the genus Varanus. And it's on this one of these islands, the Komodo Island. And they are really very ferocious looking, and they are very ferocious animals too. They actually are poisonous. So when they bite an animal, they release from they have a gland that actually is a slow-acting poison. And they are the apex predator on the island. Now, there were Komodo-like animals in Australia as well, down there, but they died out a few thousand years ago, and they were even bigger than the Komodo. So in order to understand the biology of the teeth, I need to give you information, introduction about teeth. And, whoops. Oh, well, it's plastic, so it's not a problem. It's only plastic. I'm sorry, I like to move around when I'm talking. So anyway, so basically what I want to show you, this is a 289, 300 million year old animal. This is the upper jaw, this is the lower jaw. And in both cases, what you see is a tooth which is very solidly attached to the bone, but it's being eaten away by a replacement tooth, a tooth that is going in the same place, okay? And this is the primitive condition for all animals with 4 limbs. So the old teeth are constantly being replaced by new teeth throughout the life of the animal, unlike in mammals. But the other thing that makes these early reptiles different from crocodilians and mammals today is that they are actually solidly attached to the jaw. So they're attached very solidly to it. You'll see what this means a little later. So when we look at this, you can see here, this is the tooth in a histological section. It is attached by bone of attachment here and here to the jaw. And this is a tooth that is already growing and eating away at the old tooth. And you can have the attachment, which is here. It's a very solid attachment. We call that ankylosis. Actually, it is considered to be a problem with some old people because their teeth, unlike ours, including me, there are not old enough people here for that, I suppose, our teeth move, okay? But it's almost like a disease, but it's not. It's actually a natural condition because this is the primitive condition to have all the teeth attached to the jaw by something called alveolar bone. So there is this fusion with alveolar bone between the tooth and the jaw. And there are 4 major ways in which the tooth can get attached to the jawbone. Tecodonty is this one, which we have in us and in crocodiles and dinosaurs, which is in a deep socket. A subtecodont is something like this, in which it's partially in a socket, but only a little wall here. And then we have acrodont dentition, in which is just sort of sitting on top, and then pleurodont dentition, which is sitting on the side. And this is the way they are attached to the jaw. Unfortunately, it gets more complicated than that because it depends where you are among living animals. Here are frogs and salamanders. They're outside amniota, and they have pleurodont dentition. The tooth is sitting on the side. In mammals, in us, the tooth is sitting in a deep socket. In lizard, turtles don't have teeth. Birds don't have teeth, so that's why it's empty. But lizards have this kind of condition in which the tooth is sitting right on top. It's called acrodonty or pleurodonty. And then in crocodiles and dinosaurs, we have again this tecodont condition independently evolved. Okay? It seems to be a good idea. And so essentially, what we see is that in living lizards, including the Komodo, which I'm holding here, it's quite big, as you can see, they do a number of things. They attach the tooth to the jaw very solidly, right there, right there. They continually make new teeth and replace the old teeth, polyphyodonty it's called. And they're kind of sitting on the side of the jaw. So this is towards the tongue, this is towards the outside, this is towards the tongue, this is the edge of the jaw on the outside. And you can see that continually we have teeth coming in and starting to grow, okay? This really represents the primitive condition for animals with 4 limbs. Everybody does it, at least at the beginning, this way, okay? Here are a couple of relatives of the Komodo. This is a very close relative. It's called Salvadori, Varano salvadori. And you can actually see, I think, here are the replacement teeth. And of course, we use the bugs to get this skull. And the same thing here, but this is another species, and it has more bulbous teeth because it's no longer a big predator. It's now eating all kinds of things, fruits and other things. And again, you can see the replacement teeth everywhere. The unfortunate part is that because you use the bugs to skeletonize them, some of the teeth, which are not attached yet to the jaw, fall away. So we don't actually know how many teeth there are in the skull originally. But in some cases we do. This is the Komodo. And you can see that this tooth has 1, 2, 3, 4 teeth waiting in this position of this tooth. So that's really remarkable, very strange. Now, so we have two phenomena. One is implantation, the way the tooth is sitting on the jaw, and then replacement. So we saw this is the tooth sitting on top. It's called acrodont. On the side, pleurodont. In a socket, thecodont, crocodiles and mammals. But then there is the issue of replacement. A new tooth comes in and starts to develop. And we do it as well, okay? But it takes us a long time. And our first replacement is really around 6 years of age, where the old tooth just falls out, right? And the new tooth comes in. And that's what we see here. The tooth is forming here, and as it grows, it will eat away all of this, and this will fall out, okay? Oh, by the way, this line is the gum. So the soft tissue that is above the bone, but still part of the mouth. In pleurodont animals, like in lizards, the actual tooth starts to form on the outside in soft tissue, okay? Not inside the jaw. And as it grows, it will replace it as well. In acrodont lizards, they don't replace at all. They just make one set of teeth and that's it, okay? The most remarkable of these is an animal which is found in New Zealand called the tuatara. It's not a lizard, but it's like a lizard, and there's a whole group of lizards called acrodonta, which have this kind of dentition. Dinosaurs are strange and different because they're like mammals in having this deep socket, but they actually, the teeth form in the same way as in other reptiles on the soft tissue in the mouth. And then there's a hole, there's a foramen for each tooth position, and the tooth migrates inwards and starts to develop here. And this is in theropods, you do that, and this is in a herbivorous dinosaur, Triceratops. Again, this is actually not jaw, it's bone made by the tooth, and the developing tooth module moves inside from the outside, like here, unlike in humans where the tooth forms inside the jaw. And then the tissues called a dental lamina actually dies or disappears. That's why we only get 1.5 teeth per life. Okay. So I showed you some of these interesting things. However, it gets more complicated than that because the pleurodont and acrodont teeth are ankylosed to the jaw. They're attached solidly. But in the thecodont teeth of crocodiles, dinosaurs, and mammals are actually attached by ligaments to the jaw. And we call that gomphosis. So this is solid attachment, which is the primitive condition, and gomphosis is the more derived condition that we see in mammals and in crocodiles. And that's why there is an industry. There's a whole industry in medicine where maybe 1/3 of you have these attachments to move your jaw, the teeth, into a better position. And that's only possible because there is this gap. So how does that look like? Well, actually, the vertebrate teeth represent a really unique module. You can actually take the developing bud of a tooth and put it anywhere on the body, and it will actually make all the tissues of the tooth. And that means that they produce cementum, they produce ligament, and they produce a special bone around the tooth, in addition to what you think of as a tooth, which is the enamel and the dentine, right? So in effect, each tooth module makes 5 tissues, okay? The enamel, of course, the dentine, the cementum, which is on this side, the ligaments, and then the alveolar bone, which actually attaches to the jawbone itself. And each tooth produces these things and is used in the movement and then connection to the jaw. Notice that you can go from this condition, which is gomphosis, meaning that there's a space, to an ankylosed condition, because the cementum, just if it grows all the way to this side, then you have a solid attachment. You have ankylosis. So this is why this is such an interesting phenomenon, because there are different cells that make the tooth module work. There are cells that produce the cementum, cells that produce the dentine, and cells that produce the enamel. And they grow in different directions. So the enamel grows outwards because they put layers on top. Okay? You start off with a very thin layer, and the enameloid cells actually keep on putting more enamel until they complete, and then they die, they disappear. So enamel is dead. There's no cells involved with them. The dentine actually grows inwards. And new layers are produced along this front in the pulp cavity. So they actually start off with a little cap up here, and then they keep producing dentine all the way throughout the life of the person. So this is one of the reasons that I got very interested in human dental anatomy, is because I went to the dentist, I don't know, 2 months ago, and I looked at my x-rays, and I noticed that my pulp cavity is very narrow, much narrower than 20 years ago. And that's because we keep on making dentine until we completely obliterate and close off the space where the dentinal cells would be. Essentially, they have no more space to work, and they die. So the tooth dies as well. And the third one, the cementum, actually is starting here and grows outwards as well. So that these 3 kind of tissues actually interact with each other, as does the alveolar bone that is out here. So we have a very complicated system that allows for a great deal of variation, which is great because teeth are very variable, much more so than when you think about the digestive system or when you think about your brain or other things. They really are very flexible, and lots of things can be changed in your dentition without too much problem. Okay? So because the dentine cells, dentinocytes, actually produce dentine all the time on a daily basis, you can actually measure and calculate how old the tooth is. And this was done originally for human teeth by a gentleman called von Ebner. And he noticed that there are incremental lines in the teeth as the cells of the dentine are laying down 1 layer of dentine every day. So you can actually calculate how old the tooth is by counting the lines. Okay? It gets a little bit complicated because teeth are not always straight or easy to do. So especially with teeth that are curved, you have to add this to this to this and then to this to get the complete age of the tooth, okay? From the moment that the tooth started to develop, sort of day 0, they start to make dentin, okay? And each day they add to it. And this was essentially done for crocodiles, not only for humans, by a colleague of mine 30 years ago, when in order for him to try to figure out how to measure the age of teeth in dinosaurs. So he used crocodiles as a model. It works. So now we can actually tell how old the teeth are in a theropod dinosaur and how frequently they change them, because the new tooth will come in here. It will start to eat away the tooth until this will fall out. So you can actually figure out the age of the tooth and the rate at which they are being replaced. So this is how it's done. This Erickson did it in 1996. So you calculate the von Ebner lines in the functional tooth, and you subtract from it the age of the replacement tooth, and you get the replacement rate. In other words, how often the animal is actually making a new tooth in the process of replacing the old tooth, okay? And this is what we do. We actually use histology. You actually you embed them in a plastic, then you cut it, you polish it, and you can actually see the details that I was talking about here. This is an ancient reptile. This is the alveolar bone here. This is the jawbone. This is the part of the cementum. This is a young tooth eating away at an older tooth. You can actually see the front of the solution where the young tooth is actually, cells will eat away at the old tooth as it's getting bigger. Okay. So that's what we do, and then we use the von Ebner lines to determine ages. So let's now look at the Komodo. Okay, the Komodo, as I showed you, has these serrations, and my student Teamaho actually is a superb technician, because it's really hard to cut the teeth in the right way to show the morphology, but she was able to cut along this edge to show you this is each one of those teeth as she cut it, and there's a gap between them. They're very similar to what we see in dinosaurs. And the two teeth that were sectioned here are this one and its replacement. Okay? And this is the tooth that is the adult tooth. Here is all the tissue that is holding it in place. And this is the baby tooth that is sitting here and is going to start to eat away in this area. Okay? So you can see that the shed tooth this is a shed tooth. It was dropped by the animal. And you can see the serrations nicely. We call that zyphodonty. When you look at the occlusal view here, you can see that in tooth position number 6, you have the teeth that we sectioned, and then we produce these thin sections, and the close-ups you can actually see these von Ebner lines. Okay, and they're about, you can see that this is 25 microns, so that will be about 2 microns, 3 microns each, okay, in thickness, okay? What was really startling is that when we calculated the replacement rate, we came up with 40 days. In other words, the Komodo made a new tooth every 40 days, which is kind of crazy. Crocodiles do it every 3 to 4 months. Even so, when you think about it, the crocodile lives up to 40 years, and in its life can produce 60 generations of teeth, you know. Wouldn't that be great for us? But no. Anyway, just to let you, give you a little context. Okay. So we also use tomography. So we use various kinds of tomography, computed tomography, what is called, usually it's called just CT. And you can use X-rays. In this case, this is an X-ray. Or you can use neutron. We use various kinds. But this is a CT that was done for us. And this is a one slice in the head of the Komodo dragon. And there's about 2,000 of them to give a complete head. So these are serial sections of the head. And what's really interesting, and we know that well, the Komodo is armored, has bone in the skin to make it really tough. Well, they fight with each other. They bite each other, and this protects them from their conspecifics. And you can see this is the lower jaw with the teeth and another tooth, and this is the upper jaw. And this is what Thea was able to do. She actually segmented out from the actual dead, pickled Komodo dragon, all the teeth that were still in there, even though they're just sitting there in the mouth. Okay? And what we found was really, really interesting. We know that the Komodo is a very strange animal because they're not friendly to each other. So as babies, they're likely to be eaten by the adults. The adults will eat anything. So the babies, the young ones, live in the trees and are insectivores. So when they are juveniles, they avoid the adults by living in the trees and eating mainly insects and small lizards. And their teeth are actually kind of normal, meaning that they're simple, sharply pointed teeth, no serrations. Well, they're eating insects and little lizards. They don't need the serrations. They don't have them. And their tooth replacement is relatively slower, fewer than in the adult, but it's still very fast. What happens is that they also have kind of minimal recurvature. You can see that they're kind of straight. This skull is only about 6 centimeters in length, whereas the adult will be over 20, the skull. So it's quite a size difference. So what happens is that as they get older, they move out of the trees and go onto the ground, and they become the apex predator on the island. And this is what they look like then. So you can have up to 5 replacement teeth in each tooth position. Here you can see them, and here. And the smallest, actually it shows 4 here, but the smallest is so tiny that we couldn't even reconstruct it in using the CT. It's just starting to develop. But each tooth position has up to 5 teeth, both in the upper jaw and the lower jaw. Okay? One interesting aspect that we'll come back to towards the end is that the side teeth are nice and big and strongly recurved with the zyphodonty, but the front teeth, the premaxillary dentition, is really weird. There's a gap here, and they're quite small. And what we found is this 40 days for the production of a new tooth. Overall, averaged out, it goes anywhere from, we use several specimens, averaged out to 43 to 47 days for a replacement to occur, to a new tooth to start forming. Each tooth is alive for just under 200 days, and then it's shed. So you have 5 teeth, and that's why you get every 40 days a new one. The teeth are growing in the mouth, and they're big enough, then the old tooth falls off, and the new tooth comes into functionality. Okay? And when you look at various species of Varanus, the Komodensis is this one, the shed tooth. You can see it's massive and has the serrations. And this is what the serrations look like in histological section with those pockets. They look like a dinosaur. It's really remarkable. Its closest relatives is Salvadori, and it doesn't have much of that. It has a little bit of a waviness. The clear is enamel. This is the dentine. And then Salvador is another one down here, and it still has a little bit of a bending, but not very much. Remember that these are cutting edges of the teeth. They're just like daggers. So those edges are actually very sharp where this serration is occurring, okay? Just like a steak knife, really. And these are the various sizes. This scale is 2 millimeters. This is 500 microns, and this is 100 microns as we go from the tooth, the shed tooth, to the histological section, and then a close-up. Okay. Now, that's the Komodo story. And the reason that we went to look at the Komodo is because it has this very strange morphology of the tooth that reminds us of dinosaurs, theropod dinosaurs. But what about other reptiles? So my favorite period for research is way, way away before dinosaurs, around 289, 290 million years ago. And I work in one locality in Oklahoma where we have a very extensive system of caves, and animals fall into it. And we have literally hundreds of thousands of bones of animals that fell into these caves. So we have lots of things to study, to section, to destroy, to examine, to X-ray, to neutron scan, and so on. But today what I want to show you is what we do with some of their teeth. And so these are some of the taxa. And you will notice this is the amniota, the split between reptiles on one side, which includes dinosaurs, birds, crocodiles, turtles. And then this is the mammalian side. So there is this very early split around 318 million years ago between the lineage that gave us mammals on one side and birds and crocodiles on the other. And these are some of the animals involved. Okay? So basically, we have in this locality in Oklahoma, we have various kinds of animals. We have herbivores and omnivores. We have carnivores, and we have insectivores. They range from a couple centimeters in skull length to 25 centimeters in skull length. So it's quite a range. Here is the outgroup, the amphibian, from this locality. And what we found is that when you cut it and you look at it, the age of the functional tooth, it hasn't yet fallen out, was 171 days. But the replacement rate was 135 days, which is actually very similar to living reptiles. Between 95 and 140 is the replacement rate for living reptiles. Okay? If we look at the other fossils from this locality, and they range in shape of the teeth quite a bit. Here is a look at the kind of triangular shaped teeth. These are definitely insectivores. And we cut them and we looked at them. This is a more normal looking tooth, slightly recurved. And then we have this animal, which is ridiculous. This is the first tooth in the max. It looks like a vampire. It's such a large tooth. Let me see, just to show you back here. This one. Look at that first tooth. The first vampire movie called Dracula was called Nosferatu. I don't know if you've seen it. And it, instead of having the canines, they had two large teeth in that movie. It's a silent movie. And that's what it reminds me with this animal. Anyway, so no matter what, all of these have a relatively normal number of teeth replacement rates. And they range from around 98 days to 149 days. So that's what's normal. That's what modern lizards do, like an iguana. You know, that's what they actually do. So that seems to be the primitive condition for tetrapods in general, and Komodo is just very strange, and it's doing something very peculiar with regard to its dentition. But lo and behold, one of the animals from my locality, which is 289 million years old, is this hypercarnivorous predator. It's small, skull about 10 centimeters, not very big, but it has these very dinosaur-like looking teeth with serrations, just like in the Komodo and just like in dinosaurs. And we have up to 3 teeth being replaced, even though this is a fossil, so some of it may have fallen out. Okay? And you can see here, this is a regular tooth, this is a replacement, this is a regular tooth, this is a replacement, like that. And the rate is ridiculous again, 30 to 55 days, like the Komodo. So maybe these agile predators do something different in order to make them effective predators in their environment. In contrast to that, the large predator of the time, called Dimetrodon, which is confused by kids thinking that it's a dinosaur, but it's on the mammal side, they grow to skull sizes of about 35, 40 centimeters, body of about 3 meters. And what they do is very interesting. Their replacement rate is normal, pretty normal. That's about what you would expect in a reptile. But the teeth are very long-lived, over a year. Okay? So that something peculiar is happening here, and I'll get back to you in a moment about that. Okay? Last but not least, the herbivores, the plant eaters. And we have several of them from the locality and from elsewhere. This is not from Richard Spur, but this is what they look like. There is one from Richard Spur, and all of them have very, very long replacement rates. And dental longevity is even higher. So the teeth are long-lived and very slow to replace. Okay? It takes a long time for them to replace. So when you put this together, you will see that down here is the age of the tooth, like the number of incremental lines. This is the replacement rate, the number of days. Okay? So this is longevity, and this is rate of replacement. And all the herbivores are up here. They are very long-lived teeth, and they're very slow at replacing. Okay? Makes sense because they're eating plant material. They have to build up the thickness of the teeth and so on, right? So it makes sense. Dimetrodon, that apex predator, is down here. It has a long-lived tooth, but it makes it a new tooth very rapidly. What happens is something like in mammals. In other words, we produce our teeth relatively early, but we wait for several years before they actually come into play, right? So your adult teeth actually develop relatively early on, and it takes several years for them to grow to the size that they will be replaced. So they're actually elongating the age of the tooth, but making a new one relatively quickly so that the new tooth will have time to become massive and large. The insectivores and the omnivores are here, and that really specialized little hypercarnivore, we call it Mesanosaurus, is down here with 50 and around 95 to 100 for total number of incremental lines, the age of the tooth. So where does Komodo dragon fit? Right there. So the Komodo, together with this really interesting little hypercarnivore that we published on last year, all have the same kind of strategy, making lots of teeth very rapidly, replacing them so that they actually, if they damage their teeth, no big deal. A new one comes along very quickly. Okay? Okay. Now, I know you're all interested in dinosaurs. So what do we see in dinosaurs? And the picture is very, very different. Here at the top, whoops, sorry. Here at the top is our apex predator. This is a Gorgosaurus, I think. It's not T-Rex. But it has a big tooth, about 12 to 14 centimeters. It has the serrations and has those pockets. And then here is a herbivore. And the herbivore, this is a duck-billed dinosaur, actually evolved a battery of teeth. These are very small teeth. The jaw would be about this long. There would be up to 300 teeth in each ramus of the jaw. So altogether, this duck-billed dinosaur would have 1,200 teeth. Which is crazy, right? And what's interesting about them, I told you in the beginning, but you may have forgotten, that this is each tooth position right here. And there may be up to 5 teeth in each tooth position in the duckbill. But each tooth has a foramen at that position. And that's where the teeth will move into a position to grow inside the jaw. Okay? I mentioned that before, if you remember. Okay. So what do? Well, first of all, most people have a serious misconception about dinosaurs because of Jurassic Park and other things. People are fascinated by theropods, but they're actually a very small minority in dinosaur evolution. They're here. And of course, they're related to birds and all that, but that's fine. But the vast majority of dinosaurs are herbivores, plant eaters, whether they're ceratopsians and their relatives, whether they're duck-billed dinosaurs and their relatives, whether they're these armored stegosaurs and so on. They are all herbivores. Even on the other side, the giants are actually the sauroskians. The sauropods are actually also herbivores. Okay? So the vast majority of dinosaurs are herbivores and not the theropods. So the obligate herbivores, these, including sauropod dinosaurs, they have a very rapid rate of replacement, which is very strange. Right? It's very different from the early one because the early herbivores that I talked about, the 289 million-year-old herbivores, they have very slow rates. Okay? These have very high rates. And this is in contrast to the carnivorous dinosaurs, which have very slow rates of tooth replacement. Okay? So it's kind of flipped from the Paleozoic when you go into the Mesozoic. And it's a bit of a mystery because in addition to that, when you check for size, there is no relationship between replacement rates and size of the animal. There is none. It has nothing to do with it. So when you plot that, so here's this is what you get. Here is the body mass. Here is the tooth replacement rate. And the giant theropods can take up to 777 days to replace their teeth. The rate is very slow. And some of these are actually in the range of 35 to 40 days for the large sauropods. And even in the largest of the herbivores, you get 45 to 50 days replacement rates. Only when you get into the dinosaurs, you have, the theropod dinosaurs, do you have this longevity. So it's really, really kind of backwards, okay? And the only explanation is that the herbivores are eating really, really tough food, much harder than the ancient herbivores, and much harder than what herbivores eat today. Okay? Remember, there were no grasses in the Mesozoic. And flowering plants only showed up in the middle of dinosaur evolution. So they had other things to eat, mainly conifers and cycads, which are not very nice to eat. Okay. Now, this is a very interesting contrast, but that's not my area of research. It's cool, it's interesting, but we also found something very unusual in the Komodo. And I mentioned it before, and that is that there is this real difference between the maxillary dentition and the lower jaw dentition and the premaxillary dentition, the one in the front. And you will see that, you can see that these are actually much smaller than the marginal, and even in the middle, these are other species of Varanus. This is the Komodo, and it actually has a gap here. And you would think that's really strange because, you know, when you are trying to capture prey, your first contact with the prey would be the front of the mouth, right? So you would think they should be the largest, right? They're the opposite. They're the smallest. And this really fascinated us, and we didn't know what to make of it. And we realized that there's something very interesting that has happened in the Komodo and its relatives, the other monitor lizards. And they have, like other lizards, a behavior called tongue flicking. So even iguanas, they will stick their tongue out and they wave it a little bit, okay? To smell the air, to touch the food, things like that, okay? And they pull it in, and they put the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth where there is a specialized organ that we have lost called the Jacobson's organ, and it's for smell, okay, for taste, not smell, okay, for taste. And what happened is that we see this happening in a very peculiar way in the Komodo and its relative Varanus in two ways. Like in snakes, this is a bowed snake, the front tooth is either very small, and in this case it's actually gone from the premaxilla. So you see here, that's what you get here. Okay? And the side teeth are normal, big in bowed snakes. This is not a venomous snake. This is the constrictors, right? And this is something that is very, very unique to snakes on the one hand and monitor lizards on the other. They do three things. One, they elongate their tongue. They make them very long. They narrow their tongue. So it's, instead of it fleshy, it's very elongated and slender. And they bifurcate their tongue, right? And that bifurcation, if you look at it, they spread it. See, they wave it, and they spread them out like this, okay? And what they are using it for is directionality. They're scenting prey because the molecules will be higher on this side if the prey is in that direction than on this side. So they're actually using their tongue for prey location because they're basically looking for food and they're checking where is there food for me, and they're using the tongue, okay? And this is the Komodo. It's rather remarkable. I wouldn't want to be close to him, but he's rather cute. And this is a normal grass snake, and they're doing essentially the same thing. Actually, snakes are more specialized in a way because they not only wag it once, they flick their tongue many times to pick up as much scent as possible. But both of them spread the tongue, the forked tongue, to create distance between the left and right sides. Now, you would think that this suggests that they are related to each other, right? That they're, and for a long time, people thought that varanid lizards are snake relatives, okay? But all the new data, the molecular data, and the morphological data combined show that this is not the case. So here are the snakes, and they're part of this radiation right here, okay? And they're related to a group of extinct lizards right there. But the monitor lizards are down here among a group called the angiomorphs, which are more normal-looking lizards. And they represent a complete separate evolutionary radiation from snakes, okay? And this morphology and this behavior is only found in snakes on the one hand and one branch right down here among the angiomorph lizards. So that, to me, suggests, and this is part of a paper that we're preparing, is that this is one of the most remarkable, most unusual cases of convergent evolution, so that they converged onto the same behavior and the same morphology in order to be effective predators, one with legs and one without. Okay? And I think, so just to close the story, we did the snakes as well. This is a boa, and this is a python. And they also have the same kind of pattern of tooth replacement, very rapid, okay? Very rapid, in the range of 50 to 70 days. So they also converge on monitor lizards in this way, okay? Thank you for your attention. How long was it? It's okay?
接下来是问答时间，有请黄院长为我们主持问答环节。
Okay, first of all, I think we thank you for your very interesting story here. And so I think this is a rare opportunity to have Reisz here. So is there any question?
Okay, so good afternoon, Professor. So I have two questions. Is because you mentioned that the Komodo dragon replaced their teeth per 40 days. So which means their gum tissues and the new teeth that still grow, it will be exposures on the oral cavities as a bacterial, toxins, sting molecular, and the pieces of the flesh per 40 days. So my question is, how this Komodo dragon to protect their new teeth and their stem cell stay away from the bacterial infections, periodontitis, and periodontal stone? Because especially the last one, periodontal stone, might block their teeth replace chain. So this is the first question. Thank you.
First of all, I think that in general, that's not a problem for most reptiles in terms of the chemistry of the saliva relative to the teeth themselves. The enamel is very resistant. So that's not much of a problem as I see it. But most of those teeth that are growing are in gum. They're not exposed into the mouth until they're almost ready to be used. And that was the interesting part, that when you open the mouth of a Komodo, you can hardly see the teeth, even though they're really big, right? Because they're all buried in gum and soft tissue. And you would expect actually that when they actually bite something, those serrations would actually cut themselves. But it doesn't seem to happen very much. It happens a little bit that they actually cut themselves, the gum, when they're really biting and pulling hard. But in general, it's a significant portion of the teeth are always buried in soft tissue. Okay?
So which means bacteria cannot ready to enter the new teeth and also the wounds of the gum, because they will be sitting themselves.
So remember that each module, each tooth, actually is not only the dentine and the enamel, but actually it's a complete module with periodontal ligaments and with some cementum, all traveling together to the new position. People don't think in terms of the periodontal ligaments, those things that hold our teeth in place, but are actually allows us to move the teeth, are actually formed as part of the tooth. And so while the tooth is growing and slowly moving into position, it carries all this stuff. Not only that, but it actually carries its own circulatory system and nerves into the new position. So the teeth are alive. They have connective tissue and periodontal ligament around it, as well as nerves and blood vessels associated with each tooth. So I frankly don't understand how that works, because eventually the tooth comes into place and sits and attaches. And it still stays alive, and the nerves have moved with it and now are in position underneath it. I really don't know how that happens. I don't think anybody has actually studied that process in any detail.
Okay, so my second question is just like you said, so each tooth stay in the oral cavity 40 days and finally they drop out. So my question is 40 days possibly short, but for bacterial, 40 days is long enough to make bacterial to form a biofilm in the surface and possibly to decalcification the enamels of the teeth and possibly erosion it. So is that the problem for the Komodo dragon? I mean, their enamel possibly erosion by bacterial.
Yeah, okay, so I have to caution you. You're overly concerned about the bacteria because for a long time the Komodo was thought to actually be poisonous because of the kind of saliva it has and the bacterial flora that is in the mouth. It turns out that's not, and they're happy with it. They're basically symbiotic. There's no attack from the bacteria onto the tissues of the animal. But in fact, they found out that the Komodo actually has a poison gland that it secretes. And even that doesn't seem to hurt the teeth. I have one student, former student, who's actually working now on the Komodo as well. And what they noticed, for example, and this is not published yet, the teeth are tainted red because of the high amount of blood that they actually encounter when they bite on prey. And the iron in the blood actually taints the teeth slightly red. Okay? So, and the whole idea of of bacteria and other microorganisms being harmful to us is actually a misrepresentation, because basically we have more bacteria and other microorganisms in our body than we have cells. We are a population of organisms. We're not individuals. So, and we all coexist together until something goes wrong, and then, of course, you can have flesh-eating disease, and other things. But most of the time, we are a community of organisms that create one body, and we coexist very well. The interesting part that I didn't talk about in this discussion at all is the evolution of herbivory. Herbivory is something that most people don't understand, and that is we are not herbivores. We may be vegetarians by choice, but we're not herbivores. We cannot process the terrestrial plant material that is mainly composed of cellulose. We don't have the mechanism in our body, and so animals who are herbivores actually have to have a symbiotic relationship with a whole host of microorganisms in their gut that will break down cellulose into usable ingredients, chemicals. So cows and deer do it, right? They have these symbiotic organisms, and you can actually see it in two ways. One is that they actually have the teeth to grind Okay? And that's what I'm interested in, because in fossils you cannot find the endosymbiotic bacteria. And the second is the rib cage. They get voluminous rib cages because they have to have very big guts and long guts to allow for the microorganisms to break down the food material. So this is something that most people don't realize, that in fact we don't have the mechanism to be herbivores. Okay? And one of the most fascinating things that I study is, when did herbivory first evolve? The ability to break down plant material in our guts. And that happened around the time where I'm studying, around 300 million years ago, when suddenly terrestrial vertebrates invented herbivory. And they did it, since then they did it all the time, but before that, nobody did it. There's just no mechanism for it. We don't have any evidence for herbivory older than that. Okay?
But how about the secondary metabolism? Because the reason why the teeth will decalcification mostly is not bacterial, but their secondary metabolism molecular, like lactic acid. So even bacteria won't attack the teeth or erosion of teeth, but after they degrade the flesh inside the proteinator, if they form any like the lactic acid, this kind of molecule that might possibly drop the pH level in the teeth, there still be decalcification of teeth, because you say the Komodo dragon teeth is covered by the gun, so which means the space and also the saliva around this teeth in vary. This is in a closed space. So first, the secondary metabolism molecule will easily to rise their level and damage the teeth. But bacteria, they won't do anything for teeth, but they're molecular.
I see.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There was a comment, I think. Yes.
Yeah, now I know why I'm like to be hungry. So, any question?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for your very interesting talk. Then regarding your last part, the unexpected result, yeah, about the tongue story. Yeah, I just wonder, for Komodo and the snake, then they have the similar tongue, right? Based on your result. Then I just curious, is this because they live in the similar environment? Then so they have to develop the same structures, or did you check the story back to the molecular level? Say the structure similar, or they just function similar, just like a dolphin and the fish, right? The fin found. Mm-hmm.
So the question is whether they are living in similar environments, and they don't. So they're terrestrial. But that's about all. When you look at the phylogeny, the closest relatives of monitor lizards are animals which have a fleshy tongue. Some of them have a slightly bifurcate tongue, but only slightly, like this much. Okay? But they're mainly fleshy. Okay? So the molecular data tells us that they're not related. They evolved independently, this mechanism. And it's much more complicated than when you think about it, because the tongue actually, in order to project it out so long, the muscles around it that operate the tongue have to also change. So there's a lot involved with it in terms of the design of the tongue, right? And the angomorphs are normal. So they're outgroups to the varanid lizards. If you actually, the Gila monster is another one of these outgroups to monitor lizards. I don't know if you know what they look like. They're really very strange-looking, poisonous lizards, but they have to really bite you deep in order for the poison to work. And they have a fleshy tongue, and they're closely related to varanid lizards. All the molecular data tells us. So as you go further and further away from monitor lizards, you get normal tongues, okay? And snakes are complicated because there are blind snakes, there's aquatic snakes, there's all kinds of snakes, and they vary in their morphology. This fork-tongue morphology, I don't know how prevalent it is within snakes, but I think it's pretty widely present.
This is quite unexpected because I thought probably the environment is similar. So those two, like snake and the Komodo, they needed to hide themselves, then right. to get their food. So they right. have to develop like these structures, but it's not like that.
No,
okay.
no, no, which is interesting in itself. Okay.
A story that can go back even much further than you've taken it, because we could go back to fish, and we look at modern sharks. They've obviously it's a much simpler system that they've got, but I'm just wondering how much this story can really be elaborated over what you've got so far.
So I mentioned that the tooth replacement, what we call polyphyodonty, meaning there's a continual cycle of tooth replacement, is primitive for tetrapods, but it's actually primitive for vertebrates. So if you look at sharks, even though they have been separated from us by more than 400 million years, they make the same kind of system. So they produce new teeth on the tongue side of their mouth, and they make them continually, and then the old teeth just fall out. So it's like a conveyor belt. But for each tooth position, there is a conveyor of teeth that form, get bigger and bigger, and then they fall out. Sharks are not, however, bony, so they have a cartilaginous jaw. So the teeth are not ankylosed to the jaws because there's nothing to ankylose to. It's cartilage. So it's all connective tissues and ligaments that are holding the teeth in position. Okay? But if you look at bony fishes, ancient bony fishes, and modern bony fishes, they do the same. There are some very peculiar things that happen, like I published 20 years ago about lungfishes. And lungfish are very peculiar in that they, instead of making rows of teeth, they make plates of teeth. So they're basically crushing things in the water, right? And they have solid plates, and each row of the plate is a row of teeth. So but they make new teeth, but they never replace that old teeth. They just add to it to make this very big plate. So if you look at the 3 species of lungfish that exist in the world today, one for each of the southern continents, they all do this. Very strange and very interesting way of making these plates by making new teeth, but never shedding the old ones. They pull them all together and cement them together with alveolar bone to create this massive crushing plate. Okay? So there's a lot to the story of teeth. And what I'm fascinated about is the fact that you have such incredible variation, not only in shape and function, but also in how they develop and how they evolved. So that's kind of interesting for me. And there is so much information that we can gather from them as biologists, right? Not only as paleontologists like I am. We can actually learn a lot about the biology of the organisms by looking at their teeth. Okay, you had.
I'm just very curious about the rodents or lagomorph. They have this kind of incisor that keep growing, right? But whether these kind of teeth can be found in fossil records, or they're very unique to rodents.
So that's another. Mammals are a completely different story. They solve the problem of wear, okay, in different ways, right? So you can have an open-rooted tooth that keeps on making more tooth. Rather than putting layers, they actually produce more tooth at the roots. So it's ever growing, right? And some mammals do that. Horses, for example, they have tall teeth, but they don't do that. So you can actually, there's an American expression, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. That's because you can tell the age of a horse by its teeth. So as they get older, they wear them down until there's no teeth left, okay? And so they do other things in order to make it possible for them to deal with vegetation. And of course, there's rabbits, which are really the strangest of them all, because they actually, in order to digest their food, they have to do it twice. First cycle, they poop it out and eat it again. So lots of really weird things happen with mammals. And we are not the strangest. We are kind of normal. Okay.
First, I would thank you for your presentations. Second, I would like to ask questions about the teeth of reptiles. How about Mosasaurus? Because the Mosasaurus is also a famous ancient reptiles, and some people believe that Mosasaurus are evolved from the Minotaurus lizards, and other people think there are strong relationship between the snake and the Mosasaurus. So I have watched a documentary show that the Mosasaurus have similarities to the Minotaurus lizards. So how about the research? Have any researchers about the teeth of Mosasaurus and the Minotaur?
I'm having trouble understanding you through the mask. So what, did you understand it? So you're asking about the relationship between varanid lizards and snakes? Or what? I'm not sure I understand.
Mosasaurus.
Mosasaurus.
Oh, Mosasaurus. Oh, the paleontologist. Okay. So Mosasaurs are a group of lizards which grew to very large size in the Mesozoic, and then they became extinct. And let's see if I can go back a little. And they are supposedly related to, let's see, here, okay. So, wait. So here, these are the mosasaurs that most phylogenies put them as relatives of snakes, but they're not considered to be related to monitor lizards. Okay. They're very strange and very interesting animals in their own rights. The largest mosasaurs had skulls up to 6 feet in length. But we don't have any molecular data for them. And so there is controversies related to this phylogeny in the sense that if you only look at skeletal anatomy and morphology, you get one picture. If you use molecular and morphological data, you get this. And if you use only molecular data, you get this. But of course, we don't know where mosasaurs would fit in that if you only use molecular data. So it's a good question. Mosasaurs are not considered to be close related to monitor lizards. Okay, that's the gist of it. Okay. So.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm getting old, and my hearing is not as good as it used to be, and the masks themselves create a problem. So I like to say that, you know, I started my job I got my PhD in 1975. And I was only 12 years old, you know, so that's why I look so young. No, I'm... yes, I try to keep busy, and one of the great advantages which your society does not have is that in Canada there is no mandatory retirement. Here you have to retire at 65. Well, I'm 10 years past that. And there is no law in Canada that mandates for retirement. You can actually continue to work as long as you wish, okay, which is great. And it turns out, now from an academic perspective, I've been dean and I've been chair and all that. From an academic perspective, it turns out that even when you eliminate mandatory retirement, the vast majority of faculty retire by the age of 68. And only a small percentage, like me, 1 or 2% stay on beyond 72. So, and I'm way beyond that already, so that's okay. Okay. Yes.
Comparing tooth replacement rate among dinosaurs or other extinct animals, you've mentioned that body size has no relation with tooth replacement rates, and the likely explanation for herbivorous dinosaurs should have completely different tooth replacement rate comparing to other herbivore is likely because they eat different plant material. Does that mean tooth replacement rate can be a direct indication of ecological niche for extinct animals?
The question is whether there is a correlation between feeding behavior, ecological position, and tooth replacement rates. I think it's much more complicated than that because, for example, you have within the duck-billed dinosaurs and their relatives, you have animals which have a single row of teeth, big ones. They're about this big and wide. And you can have these tiny little teeth of which there are 1,200 of them. And they do very different things in terms of how they handle vegetation. So I think that there is a relationship between feeding behavior and tooth longevity. So how they use their teeth will create a feedback loop for natural selection to work on the teeth, either to shorten the replacement rate or to increase it. So it's how you use your teeth has a greater effect than where you live and what is your community like. So I think I think that's real, that there is a relationship between how you feed and how that affects your teeth overall through evolution, okay? So one of the most interesting things is what elephants do with their teeth. So they grind food a lot, okay? So they take really resistant material for fooding. And what they evolved through time is a fused tooth plate so that they, as they get older, they add first the premolars, then the second premolar, then the first molar, second molar, and the third molar, and they add them together to create this massive grinding surface about this big. But they take for a long time to do that, so that their last molar actually comes into play when they're in their 30s, late 20s, okay? So they're adapting through evolution, their dentition to the feeding behavior that they have. And I think that is the driving force behind the strategies that animals take in terms of replacement rates and longevity of teeth. So that's why I'm really interested in human teeth, because there are lots of us. We can have lots of teeth to study, and we're just we're going to start the project with NCKU, with the dental school there, to see what can we learn about what happens to our teeth when we get really old, right? And I'm interested because I'm getting really old, so I want to know what's the biology of it, you know. And there are essentially three major ways in which, during aging, our teeth become less and less functional. One is that the ligament, the periodontal ligament, loses its ability to hold the tooth. So when you get old, your teeth really just fall out because it's not attached to the jaw, and the ligaments are not holding it well. The second is that the teeth become very brittle, and they break easily. My teeth break easily. And the third is that the jaw itself recedes with age. So the bone is resorbed, and then you lose contact between the teeth and the jaw. So those are the three ways. And since we have lots of teeth to look at, we can at least see what happens with the quality of the tooth. The periodontal ligament is something that I would know nothing about. But looking at the inside of the teeth, the way we did with the Komodo, would be very interesting to see what happens as you get older. And one of the really interesting parts of this is that we may be able to use this information in anthropology. So, you know, Jilin University has one of the largest collections of human anthropological material from 10,000 years to the present, hundreds and thousands of specimens. So I'd like to see if we can take one of those teeth and see what happens in the old age of somebody who lived 5,000 years ago. You know, it would be really cool. So, yes?
So do you think maybe there are some special nutrition factors to determine the replacement rate for this organism?
This method that I just showed. We cut and we look at incremental lines.
Yeah.
So there is not really good information about that yet. So we want to see, do the cells that produce the dentine, do they die at a certain age and stop producing more incremental lines? Does the dentine itself deteriorate, chemically changing in aging? We don't know. Most of the studies stop at 65, around 65 years of age. We don't know what happens after. And most of us now, thank goodness, live beyond 65. So we want to know. I'm curious. Anyway.
Yeah, because tooth growth is highly dependent on nutrition. Right. So maybe some organisms have some specific nutrition requirement to support tooth growth.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's very interesting because the tooth rate are so different.
Right.
So, okay. So I have an additional question for this. And I'm wondering about, do you have any comment for the ordinary bear and the giant panda?
Oh, I just came from Tainan, and we're looking at the profile of various herbivorous teeth, living things, because one of my colleagues in Tainan at CKU is interested in this. And there were some questions, and one of the first things I asked, can you get some panda teeth? Very difficult. So it's political, yes? So, but it would be very interesting because most bears are omnivores or carnivores, whereas the panda is a herbivore. So it would be really interesting to compare, but I don't know, maybe I have to go to China to do that. Which I can, because I'm very lucky. The Jilin University actually made me a lab in Changchun. So they came to Toronto, they looked at my lab, they took many pictures, and then they built a similar lab in Jilin University. So it's nice. So I have 2 colleagues, 2 faculty members, 6 graduate students, and so on, doing work there. So it's very nice.
So you combine the within as you created.
They're very interested in paleontology. So, and you know, you don't. So that's okay. That's why I start doing work on living things, because I have connections to Taiwan.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Or yeah, I was told that this is a longer. Usually my talks are about 50 minutes to an hour, but I was prepared to give you another lecture if you wanted to. But I think you had enough. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we will start here, and please just thank Dr. Okay, thank you very much for your coming. Yeah, thank you.
今天的惠蓀讲座到此圆满结束，感谢各位贵宾、师长及同学们的热情参与。提醒您。